One of the reasons Blueprints is such an impressive game is the level of detail put into it. Even after playing it for over 1,000 hours, I'm still making interesting new discoveries, as are many other members of the community. But never, in all my years focused on secret hunting, have I ever experienced a game that inspires quite this level of cryptodolia. Are these unsolved secrets or just background noise meant to help hide the real puzzles? Blueprints is heavily inspired by Maze, after all, itself filled with seemingly innocuous but supremely important detail. This type of thing happens with every video game known to contain hidden content, but Blueprints really stands in a class of its own. So after taking a bit of a break, I return now to this endless spiral. Before we jump into the deep end, I must warn you, there will be spoilers galore in this video. I'll be showing and discussing every part of the game, from the beginning to the very end. So if you haven't already finished it to the extent that you're ever going to, please go and do that before watching this. I do not want to ruin any of it for you. Also, this video presents a lot of information. I've tried to give it some semblance of organization, but each one of these topics I can easily spend an entire video talking about, and I probably will at some point, but I'll be talking about all of them today. First, let me give you a couple examples for the amount of detail I'm talking about. Fairly early on, there's an important puzzle solved by reading the lyrics on each of these music sheets found throughout the manor. The music itself, though, has nothing at all to do with solving the puzzle. I asked my friend Keith, who some of my viewers might know from the Noita modding community or is one of the developers of Primordialis, to play us this piece, and this is what it sounds like. Thank you, Keith. Anyway, yes, it's a more complex variation of her ladyship's theme, except this version never actually plays at any point in the game. You would only know it if you could read and play music yourself or watch a video like this. Not only does this music make sense in the lore, but when taken with this note, could be a rabbit hole of possibility leading to yet another massive puzzle. Next, at some point during a playthrough, you gain the ability to receive messages from the members of the manor's staff as they, from a distance, cheer you on throughout your journey. These sometimes contain hints, oftentimes lore, and sometimes actual puzzle solutions for those who might be falling behind, and they continue for years into the future. The game begins on November 7th, 1993, and each run is a day, of course. Most people will finish their entire playthrough sometime in 1994, but the staff continue to leave messages in here as they wish you a happy birthday and happy new year repeatedly until the year 2000. Obviously, he couldn't keep writing these forever, but instead of just making them stop abruptly with no good reason, the developer actually made use of a real-life reason: the feared and fearsome Y2K bug.
This is not one of the summer movies where you can close your eyes during the scary parts.
Wherein the entire world at the time feared a new dark age, with banks losing track of everyone's money and all computer systems going haywire. Well, thankfully this never ended up happening in the real world, but the world of Mora was not so lucky, it seems. Or at least the Blackbridge network wasn't. So yeah, the developer actually came up with a very thoughtful and logical reason that made sense in the world of the game for him to stop writing all of these. What other developer would go to this length to explain why the messages stopped? How many players are ever actually going to see this? Short of me showing you, obviously. And yes, I did actually go years into the future on my own save without any kind of save editing, just so I could get my own footage of these. At the time of this recording, I'm on day 2305. Actually 2306 now because I had to record that. And no, the gallery has not been removed from the draft pool, and both the paintings and Paragon statues are still around. Although I have heard that there's a bug and the gallery is actually supposed to be removed after a year. What does happen is Key 8 starts spawning inside the Lost and Found very regularly after those 365 in-game days. So, now, if you haven't played much of the game, or maybe you just stopped at room 46, hopefully now you have an idea about how deep it goes. Good, because now we're gonna go a whole lot deeper. Back in May, Dogubomb made a Steam announcement sharing a few details on an upcoming content update. When that update will release, we do not yet know, but we can already see some vestiges in the game of the content confirmed to be coming. My favorite of these can be found inside the kitchen. In the back corner, we can find a pet dish containing food and water. If we were to return to the kitchen later in the day, we'll find that the food and water was consumed by something. And we can even refill the water if we have the watering can with us, which itself can be refilled at the sink if you have water being pumped to it. What sort of creature might be lurking in the shadows?
I see a black cat tied to a red flag.
Yup. Next, there's a suspiciously blank spot in our in-game journal found in the library. This might be where our high scores for Dirigiblocks will be recorded, because yes, both the arcade version of Dirigiblocks and the home console version are also coming in this content update. And this is probably why there's a crossed out label for a cabinet, i.e. an arcade cabinet in the utility closet's fuse box. So we'll probably have to find the switch for this, hopefully from a new puzzle, but maybe just from digging it up somewhere. Hopefully the switch does need to be found and it doesn't just appear here on the fuse box once the update comes out, because that would be disappointing. Anyway, other than these few vestiges of confirmed upcoming content, the update is supposed to also add quality of life and accessibility features such as the long missing colorblind mode, as well as new cutscenes maybe for the base game, but also confirmed for the Dare and Curse modes. Other possible puzzle pieces in the game may or may not be pieces of unfinished content. So, moving on to my next category. There are certainly a lot of peculiarities in the game that are probably bugs, but that are definitely interesting enough to make me question that. At the very least, a couple of these shed some light into how the game engine itself works. Out of all of these quote-unquote bugs that fall into the category of maybe intended big secrets, only one of them that I know of was fixed. Again, I'm just gonna give you a quick warning. This is gonna show some very late game spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay. A while ago, somebody noticed that if we look at the tended rosevine phrase in one of the library's invisible ink books under a magnifying glass, the text, except for the first letter of each word, is actually lowercase. When unmagnified, every letter is a capital. This, of course, led to a massive spiral. Maybe those words' first letters, TRV, mean something. Quick, everyone, look at every single scrap of paper with the magnifying glass to check if there are more words that behave differently when magnified. No. This actually, as soon as it was spreading like a wildfire through the secret hunting part of the community, was patched. So no longer do these letters appear lowercase when magnified. However, like I said, this was the only one that I know of that was fixed. Let's now talk about a few curious bugs that remain in the game. We'll start with this one. Normally, entering the attic looks like this. However, under very, very specific circumstances, you can get these very curious motes of light to appear. Those specific circumstances are as follows. First, we have to enter room 46 before drafting the attic. And then we have to wait until at least 8 p.m., which is when the stars start appearing in the sky, and then we can draft the attic, but it needs to be drafted on either the far eastern or far western edge or wing of the manor. If all of these conditions are met, you've been to room 46, it's after 8 p.m., and you draft the attic on the far east or west side, then entering now will spawn the mysterious lights, but only under those circumstances. Why? Maybe it is a mystery. However, this does seem to be tied directly into entering room 46. You see, these same lights also appear outside the western window of room 46 when we're inside. So it could just be that under these circumstances, we're forcing the game to use this skybox for the attic. Maybe it's a mystery, maybe it's a bug. It does show that there is a connection between room 46 and the attic. Whether that's intentional design or just an internal quirk of the engine remains to be seen. Next, we learn the much desired ability to stop time. Not literally, but this is not supposed to look like this. Neither is this. Normally, these clock pendulums are always in motion, but using, again, a very specific method, we can stop them. To begin, we need to draft the boiler room. Secondly, we need all 3 steam ducts of the boiler room to be connected to steam ducts in the adjacent rooms. So I'm using the furnace, the darkroom, and security. In order to easily set this up, you might and probably will need multiple rerolls, possibly the Inkwell constellation. And now let's head into the boiler room. As you can see, I had 1 steam vent there, another one here connected to the darkroom, and the third one over here connected to the furnace. Now solve the puzzle in the boiler room if you haven't already. Make sure all the pipes are being routed to the central turbine over here. And then in order to make this trick/glitch work, we need to route the steam through all 3 of these vents, starting from one side, then the center, then the other side. It should work after this, i.e. the pendulums of the clocks should stop. However, sometimes, I don't know why, you might need to route the steam all the way back to the other side again. This one is almost definitely a bug. In fact, I do remember somebody once kind of trying to explain to me why it happens, but my non-technical brain does not remember the details at all. Probably the biggest sign that this is a bug is that we can still hear the pendulum swinging sound inside the clock tower, even though the pendulum is stopped. If this was an intended feature or hint, then I think they would have probably made it so that this sound effect stopped along with the pendulum. Very interesting nonetheless. Again, possibly shedding some light onto how the engine of the game itself functions. But moving on. Now I just want to highlight the effects of drafting 2 different rooms outside using the Blessing of the Monk, beginning with the entrance hall. Of all the rooms that can be drafted out here, this is one of the most interesting because if you look at the quote-unquote reflections in the floor of the framed pictures, you might see something out of place. Here's a close-up of the Reddington skyline painting's reflection. It shows numbers 1 through 9 and all the letters of the English alphabet. In fact, there are actually a few extra letters. Q, U, O, I, N, K. Quoink. Anyway, the other 2 pictures are the face and ace. These combine into this one game asset. It's a texture sheet. These designs are used throughout the game to add detail in sometimes very creative ways. In fact, we can see part of this, the holly leaf and surrounding lines, inside of the boudoir safe. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the final main chapter of this video. That's right, we have not even come close to getting to the juicy bits yet. This, however, is probably just a bug, yet interesting enough for me to include in a video about secret hunting in this wondrous game. Now, for the final of the monked rooms that I'm going to talk about briefly, we have the vestibule, which has the unique distinction of being the only room we can draft as an outer room that we can't even enter. The door just will not open. Is this a secret? Do we have to figure out a way to open this door in order to access some other part of the atelier or somewhere else? That's always a possibility with this game. However, there is a very good explanation for why we can't open this door and go inside. You see, whenever you enter vestibule, 3 of the doors in this room unlock and the 4th one becomes locked. Because one of the doors locks when you enter, which could end up being the door you just walked through, some people believe that we're not allowed to enter the outer room version of the vestibule because otherwise we might get soft locked. So yeah, it does make a lot of sense. But maybe this door is all that stands between us and the answer to our final mystery. But we're not quite there yet. If we stand down in the precipice in front of the chess puzzle room and then look out over the ravine, we can actually see quite clearly another entrance in the sheer cliffside. An entrance that we never access at any point throughout the game. An entrance that is right around the location of the elevator that brings us down into the ravine. Strange. Some people think, however, that this is just a visual bug, and that this entrance that we think we're seeing in a location we haven't accessed is nothing more than just the well entrance into the basement, and that we're just seeing it through walls that aren't yet loaded in from this location, or whatnot. I'm not so sure about that explanation, but what more can this possibly be, right? For now, we'll just file this one into possible bugs. And now, moving on to Chapter 3. In a game as filled with detail and secrets as this one, a good number of those details have to be red herrings, right? Case in point, the hats. What is going on with all of these hats? Seriously, they're everywhere. Why are there so many different types of hats just scattered all over the estate? Is it just like, oh, they're rich people, so they have a lot of hats? Or is there something larger going on here? We can find multiple instances of the same hat, or at least the same style of hat, in multiple rooms. Does that mean, for instance, that there's a relationship between the the solarium, and the maid's chamber? Or the master bedroom and the East Wing Hall? And then of course we have the coat check with all of these different types of hats. I am not quite sure yet, even though I've spent a considerable amount of time thinking about these hats. Something else that I do find interesting is that there are also a lot of hats in Maze. You know, the book puzzle by Christopher Manson that this game, Blueprints, is directly inspired by and dedicated to. Now, without saying too much, it just so happens that a hat in combination with a letter is very important in Maze. Keep that in mind for now. Now, what about the globes? While there are more globes around, such as one in the storeroom and another one in the treasure trove, there are 5 of these in the game that can be interacted with. One large one and one small one in the observatory, another large one in the study, a small one in the drafting studio, a third large one in the trophy room, and another small one in the dormitory. Why these rooms? Is there any significance to that? Also, these have the very important distinction of being, out of all of the details and objects in the entire game, some of the only ones that can actually be interacted with and that are fully animated. Except, of course, for the gramophone here in the boudoir, which I just noticed now, after recording the rest of this entire video, that this is also animated. We can't interact with it, though. I've spent over 1,000 hours in this game, and I'm just now noticing, or possibly remembering, that this is also animated. I just went into the game to record some footage of objects around the house that are not animated, and I found this. Anyway, moving on. If these truly have no purpose in some hidden puzzle, why go through all the trouble of even animating them, especially since there are countless other objects throughout the game that are not animated, or that we can even interact with? Maybe they exist just to allow players to see a 3D representation of the world, purely for lore, or maybe they are just red herrings. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is that a globe is also a very important thing to Maze. So some of these objects in the game could exist purely as callbacks or references to that work that most inspired the developer, Tonda Ross. Finally, we have the swans. These are also prolific throughout the game, whether they be imagery, carvings, sculpture, or origami. We can find them in many rooms throughout the estate. And we learn from the Red Prince manuscript that the swan represents the realm of Morajai. What the significance of this might be is anyone's guess, and it might be manifold, though they could be most representative of the concept of a swan song, perhaps. Because in many ways, the house itself is a swan song. So too might be the player character, Simon. When we consider all that she stood for, along with Simon's ascension of the throne room, and all that might follow in the wake of the plot of the game, Mary just might have considered him her swan song. Whether or not this swan iconography exists to help us solve any puzzle or deeper mystery remaining in the game, I am not so sure about. Thus, because of its prolific nature, along with the hats and the globes, I put it in this category: possible red herrings. Alright, so we've talked about vestiges of upcoming content, mysterious possible bugs, things that might be red herrings, and now it's time to get into what I consider to be the really big mysteries. And we're going to begin with the one that I have put the most thought and time into myself. This is the ceiling of the mechanarium, with its very pronounced letter N detail. I already mentioned the connection between a hat and a letter in Christopher Manson's Maze, and there are, of course, both hats and letters also in Blueprints. In Maze, one of the big puzzles is the spelling out of a hidden phrase when taking the correct path through the house. Therefore, I believe that there is, likewise, a hidden phrase written out throughout the manner of Blueprints. After all, seeing as how pretty much all games with secrets or mysteries these days get data mined, what better way to hide what could possibly be a huge revelation? A message left for us perhaps by Mary. It's not just a letter that can easily be found in the game's data and then spoiled, but an actual hidden message or even riddle written across the rooms of the estate. So now that I've told you all this, where are the other letters? Well, our next one can be found inside the planetarium. On the base of the central star projector, there appears to be a lowercase letter E. A third can be found inside the solarium. If we enter and then turn to the left, 5 of the glass panes are darkened, forming the letter T, which is conveniently what this room is used for, a tea room. It's been found that if we were to take the arium suffix of these 3 rooms, mechanarium, planetarium, and solarium, and then add the 3 letters we can find in these rooms, we can unscramble these letters into the word ruminate, which is, of course, one of the words used to solve the gallery puzzle. We don't know for sure whether or not this was intentional. I mean, there is another arium room, the aquarium, which itself has both X's if drained and possibly a W in the electric eel variant. But it's still an interesting theory that conveniently works. However, there are several more potential letters for us to find, so let's continue. Our next letter can be found within Denny Ravain's hovel. There is the appearance of a capital E when looking at the right-hand side and only the right-hand side of the stovepipe. Looking at this chair again inside the workshop, we can see that the front makes an obvious capital H. This could just be a coincidence, but again, because this game is inspired by Maze, which contains a puzzle concerning hidden words, anything bearing a striking resemblance to a letter just might be a letter. For another more obvious one, we must look no further than the garage. Inside the car, we can see an L on the center of the steering wheel. Why there's an L, I'm not so sure. The only character whose name begins with L is Lionel Epson, our great-uncle on our grandmother's side. But he never lived in Mount Holly Estate, but in the ancestral Epson home of Featherfall Keep, until his father died and he began to travel the world, apparently never to return. Maybe it's just the make of the car and means nothing? Nevertheless, here is an L. And now for a really interesting one. Inside the catacombs in front of the Draxus sculpture, if we look up at the skylight and then turn, we might see a stylized capital A. There are many, many more of these that the community has documented across the entire estate, and that I have as well. I've spent at least dozens of hours just focused on this one task. Of course, I could be falling victim to the same pareidolia or cryptodolia, as I called it in the video's intro, that I criticized. I mean, I can see an F on this style, a chair that we can find in the guest bedroom, the nook, and the library, but does that make it an F? It doesn't. But I still do very strongly believe that there is something more to these hidden letters, especially when you take into consideration the enormous importance of them in Maze. Anyway, there is much more to think about with this one, but moving on for now. Just as we can find many letters scattered around, we too can find the lack of letters.
There is a letter missing.
Like on these bags of coffee in the trading post, there is a missing E, café. But before you say maybe that's how they spell coffee in this world, there's a perfect example here in the pantry. There's a bag of coffee up there with one E, and then coffee with two E's right here. And that's not even the most interesting one. Have you ever looked very closely at the keyboards throughout the game? They happen to be missing the I key, and not just in security, but in the office, Blackbridge Grotto, the shelter, and the laboratory as well. This is actually not a texture. This keyboard was constructed. Just saying, there is an I texture in the game. They could have very easily put it on here. Speaking of the letter I, why is there an I up here in the center of the north circle on this map in one of the classrooms? Please let me know down below in the comments if you have an idea about this. Why is that there? And next to this figure with a blindfold over her eyes, chained to a bat and a vulture, I think that is, not an eagle. What is the significance of this? Is there something about eyes also in Blueprints? Oh no. Both of these maps just have a crazy amount of lore and information on them as well. Just saying, that's another mystery. Next, we have a series of mysteries involving patterns, if you will. Like these panels in the boiler room. Many people, including myself, think that there is encoded information in this. I mean, look at the animation. It's not even a perfect loop. It just seems to go through a sentence, breaks at the end, and then repeats. There has been a little bit of work on this, but so far nothing solved. Another grid pattern are the votive candle stands in the tombs. There are two of these with different lit candles on them. And there are many people in the community who believe that these may be in conjunction with the boiler panels and other possible grid patterns throughout the game are yet another hidden message, this one encoded. Although, if there is information we can get from these, maybe it works together with those hidden letters I was just talking about in the previous section. Some sort of Baron Baffler's-esque letter assignment puzzle. Speaking of Baron Baffler's, the agreed upon solution to it, Mantis, has never been used. None of us have any idea why this puzzle culminates in the word Mantis. Is there a significance to that, or is this just a fun little puzzle that was added into the game with no connection to any lore or anything else? That seems rather unlikely in a game like this where everything is connected to everything else. Also, Baron Baffler's is always found here in the bedroom with this hand pointing down to it. There's another hand in the office that points to the location of the hidden safe, and yet another one or four in the Chamber of Mirrors pointing upwards, hinting at the secret of that room. So why are there two hands in the foyer pointing at one another on either side of the exit door? What could these hands possibly be hinting at? Because all of the other hands have been hints. Are we supposed to draft the foyer in a very specific spot and then open this door to something? None of us in the community have been able to find the answer to this yet, although some have very much tried. There is an interesting connection between Baron Baffler's and this image though, the soil survey. Inside of the Mount Holly blueprints, the bedroom is actually drafted on this plot. File 1, rank 2, the barren ground. Get it? Barren, baron. There is actually another hidden message though, or word, during this cutscene. That binary is saying A, R, I, E repeatedly during the entire cutscene. Airy. Of course, there is a letter missing at the end to make Ares, i.e. Ares Court. Another prevailing theory in the community is that there is yet another hidden passage within Ares Court. Is there a secret room behind this portrait of an old king? There is some evidence that there just might be. Since we're on the topic of Ares, data miners have found references to an eclipse event that can be apparently triggered in the game, though nobody knows exactly how, although it might be related somehow to day 46 in-game. Many people also consider this note in the clock tower to not only be a hint for westwardly winds and the sigils puzzle, but for this mysterious eclipse event as well. Maybe this blank space in the scrapbook is actually reserved for something related to this astronomical event, but until we know more about this, maybe in the forthcoming update, all we can do is wonder. Although it is really interesting that the letters we can see inside of the blueprints version of the gallery spell moon. But we'll get back to this gallery soon enough. First, let me cover a couple more small mysteries. Such as this one. When drafted on the 8th rank, the garage contains a blue memo inside of the car which reads, "The license plate on this car is an acronym." An acronym? Swan Song is not an acronym. An acronym would be a word that starts with S, one with W, one with N, another with S, another with N, and then one with G. So a lot of us in the community have been thinking south, west, north, south, north, garage. Although I did try drafting rooms and moving to the south, to the west, to the north, to the south, to the north, and into the garage. And no, Mary did not appear in the driver's seat of the car ready to drive us home to Reddington, unfortunately. So what acronym this stands for is entirely a mystery. Next, the bookshop. What is up with the bookshop? If we look at the room icon of it, we can see very clearly that there should be a space back here. And sure enough, if we follow the molding around the top of the room, it follows the shape of the room, behind the bookshelves. On this side, everything looks normal, it just cuts in right behind the bookshelves, but on this side, there very much seems to be a hidden compartment behind them. So far, nobody's been able to access it legitimately. We can glitch out of bounds in order to see that there is probably something behind this, but how to move one of these bookshelves, nobody knows. And because of how the game works, where it doesn't load in the contents of a room unless you trigger it correctly, there's no way for us to know what's back here by glitching out of bounds. We would have to actually find the trigger. Curiously, the books on this table look strikingly similar to the layout of a Morajai puzzle box. Obviously, we've tried clicking the books themselves, but maybe there's a Morajai box somewhere in the game that corresponds to these books, and aligning the tiles in this orientation or otherwise solving it opens this compartment. Food for thought. Okay. Now we return to the blueprints version of the gallery. Within the Mount Holly blueprints, there are multiple colored paths to take, starting down here and ending up here. We have the red path, then the orange path, and then the violet path, and then the true blue path. Of course, every room of the blueprints has a painting pair puzzle, and solving that puzzle gives us a letter, which results in a phrase, "These vying plans forge barren crest among Huum blessed." Yeah, but what if we were to take only the letters of the rooms that we pass through for each of these colored paths? For the red path, we would have M, P, T, Y, and then E for the atelier. For the orange path, we would have M-O-R-T-H and then E for the atelier. For the violet path, L-E-F-O-S-N and then E. And then the blue path just straight up spells out Swan Song as you progress down it. So that one, we don't have to unscramble. The other ones, however, 1, 2, 3, 4. Empty, mother, oneself, Swan Song. Empty mother, oneself, Swan Song. And that is crazy that all of this fits together the way it does. The entire game of blueprints is just so well done. Of course, you might not feel that way about the RNG, but we'll agree to disagree. But the rough drafts area beyond the atelier is already a puzzle masterpiece. It's so extremely impressive, it just blows my mind. And it gets even more complex with this. The amount of wordplay and puzzles on top of puzzles on top of puzzles that Tonda Ross was able to accomplish with this is just insane. This brings us ever so close to our final mystery. just one more right before that. Whatever happened to letter number 3? The letter we can find in Herbert's personal freezer makes it clear that he intended Simon to find them all. They were stolen, probably by Denny Ravain, and then used as blackmail before being returned, yet we only ever get to read 7 of them. And whatever happened to the final 2 rubies? The stolen crown of Arinda Ares contained 8 of them. We find 6 with 6 of the letters, but of course the drafting studio safe doesn't have one, being too small. We can find a gem holder here in the orchard shed, implying it was stolen by the old groundskeeper Denny Ravain when he stole the letters. So he probably ended up stealing 2 of them. Why he didn't just steal all of them, we don't know. We do find out that the remaining 2 were recovered, but by whom? And it's just strange that Mr. Ravain wouldn't take all of them. Maybe this gem in the showroom is actually one of the royal rubies and we just don't know it yet.
Until we meet again some distant day, I will have nothing more to say.
All of this makes me confident that there's more we haven't found yet. I think there's at least one hidden, possibly enciphered message no one has read. Maybe it's the answer we've all been looking for, the answer to that ultimate of mysteries. How do we access the rocket silo so we can take a rocket to the moon? Just kidding. For anyone who doesn't know, the rocket silo is a meme that started in the early days of the community before the game released when we had just the demo. Anyway, the real biggest mystery. Where, oh where, is Mary Matthew Epson? Is she dead? Is she really the new ruler of Araja? Or is she simply missing somewhere within the floor plans? According to this interview by Jason Schreier, when asked about the fate of Mary and other unresolved questions, Tonda says, "I'm not ruling out that those aren't able to be resolved within the game. So far, nobody has been able to figure out the answer, but it's a good possibility the answer is there to be figured out." In another interview, Tonda said that there are definitely still mysteries left in the game, and even beyond what I've covered in this video, there are other curiosities. Rosewary is an actual variety of puzzle, meaning that there could possibly be a hidden method to play Rosewary in this game. To what end, your guess is just as good as mine. And what is in the lavatory?
What is in the lavatory?
A mirror.
Are you not denying the fact that there is a
Can't use that. Deny.
Anyway, I want to thank you all very much for watching this video. I always put a lot of work into them, so I really appreciate that you guys appreciate that work. As always, there is much more on the way. I haven't even begun yet, to be honest. I have terabytes of footage for many upcoming projects. So if you enjoyed this video, leaving a like and a comment does always help. Subscribe if you're interested in seeing more Blueprints content, but also content for other games containing deep secrets, mysteries, lore, ARGs, and knowledge-gated mechanics. Thank you to my patrons for your support. And please, all of you, have a great day.